So what is, in your mind, the fastest way to disarm a mythicist?
I've got a book called Historical Jesus where I list a dozen and a half texts, many of them outside the New Testament, in the ancient world for the existence of Jesus. But one probably better example I would use, some say, yeah, but you're a Christian. Okay, Bart Ehrman, an atheist New Testament scholar. Bart Ehrman gives 15 independent sources for the crucifixion of Jesus within 100 years. Now, 100 years is actually kind of strict, but it's a nice, narrow parameter for saying Jesus lived. 100, and here's an atheist, 100 years time, 15 different sources evidencing Jesus' death. If he died, he had to have lived. So Bart Ehrman calls that one of the two best evidences we have for that Jesus lived in history. The other one is that Paul is the best New Testament reference we have. Critics talk about half of Paul's epistles, 7 out of 13, being accredited, and you can use them in arguing because they're great sources. Well, the best thing Paul gives us is that he was an eyewitness to the eyewitnesses. Paul, in Galatians 1 and again in Galatians 2, he went to Jerusalem and got to know Peter, James, the brother of Jesus. Then in Galatians 2, John, they're all together. And the topic they're discussing, as Paul tells us, is the nature of the gospel, to make sure they're all on the same page. And Paul concludes, yes, they're all on the same page. But here, that's two great sets of data for the existence of Jesus. 15 independent sources for the crucifixion of Jesus, and Paul knowing himself, of course, Peter, James, and John, the big four. He knows all of them, and he can ask them whatever questions he wants to about what Jesus looked like when he was walking and talking in Galilee. So it would be like asking George Washington or asking Thomas Jefferson, what was George like? Asking Adams and John Quincy Adams and Monroe and so on, what do you know about George? And then it'd be really cool if you could talk to Martha. And that's neat because we have the women's testimony for going to the tomb and so on. So you make a multifaceted case for George Washington being the first president of the United States. We can do the same thing with Jesus actually having existed. And as Bart Ehrman says, he knows of nobody, no accredited specialist in the field of religion, no matter how liberal or how atheist or whatever, none of them who will have university, college, or seminary positions, none of them teach that Jesus never lived. The guys who teach it and claim to be scholars are people who don't have accredited degrees. He said with two exceptions, is Bart's count. The rest do not have accredited degrees, and none of them have university positions.
Why are they making such a big splash, do you think?
Probably because they infiltrate almost every website there is and have a bunch of, they have a loud presence. Whatever side you're on, recently there was a choice for a Supreme Court justice in this country. How come the voices that made it on the news shows were the little chattering voices that ran next to the senators and got up in their ear and chirped at him and wouldn't let them sit down at the tables, and because that kind of thing makes the news. And people say, whoa. And when they say, oh no, and they pretend like they're scholars, but they don't have any training, they haven't been in the field, and all the other scholars, atheists even like Bart Ehrman, say they're wrong. So to me, that's the real test. It's not just Christians saying they're wrong. It's non-Christian scholars saying they don't have a chance.